Like I said, this is going to probably become a regular thing, but I'm going to read a little section of Recessional by Rudyard Kipling. He's probably one of my favorite poets. Had some interesting theology in a few places, but a good poet, so here we go. God of our fathers, known of old, Lord of our far-flung battle line, beneath whose awful hand we hold dominion over palm and pine. Lord God of hosts, be with us yet, lest we forget. For heathen heart that puts her trust in reeking tube and iron shard, all valiant dust that builds on dust, and guarding calls not thee to guard. For frantic boast and foolish word, thy mercy on thy people, Lord. Welcome back to Reasoned Refrain, where it is my goal for you to know what you believe and why you believe it, and to preach the gospel of resurrection by grace alone, through faith alone, over and over again. I am your host, Stephen Curto. Please feel free to talk back to the show by emailing Stephen@reasonedrefrain.com. That's Stephen, Stephen, the correct spelling, at reasonedrefrain.com. Drink of the day is a very special Lagavulin 16, and the reason that the very special Lagavulin 16 is the drink of the day is because we're back on video! Hey, welcome back. Cheers to you, listeners. Head over right now to YouTube, find the Reasoned Refrain YouTube channel, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, do all of that stuff that you're supposed to do for YouTube channels. I don't know what's what. Gotta love Lagavulin 16. The smoothest Islay Scotch known to man. Save it for special occasions like this one. And a very special occasion it is, of course. Let's go ahead and get into the show with my three favorite news stories from the last week.
It's my three favorite news stories from the last week.
And the first of these news stories is the most important news story of the week. It is this video of a cat. So just so you know context, this week a new Guinness World Record was set. And the record that was set was the most tricks by a cat in 1 minute. So we're going to watch this 1 minute video, and I'll narrate for you guys who are just listening. This is what you gotta go over to the YouTube channel. It'll also be available on Odyssey, just FYI, another video hosting platform, because I don't expect content to like this to last on YouTube for very long. But there's a video of this cat performing a bunch of tricks, and it's I won't say it's the most riveting video that you'll ever watch. It does prove conclusively why cats are the worst. This video shows exactly why dogs are much better pets than cats, because these are considered tricks. So let's go ahead and take a look. Dramatic music. Go around the legs. So the first one is actually interesting. She's like, she walks in between the legs. Like, one of the tricks was go onto red carpet. Another one was look up, wave with right hand, shake head, and then, kid you not, the cat just looks from left to right. Look left, look right. Those are two separate tricks as well. High five and high 10. Cross left paw while sitting. And there has to be a little ring bell with paw. That's the move ball with paw, evidently. No, it's not labeled. Not even the labeling of this video is particularly good. Touch target with nose. It's literally sitting there on this carpet the entire time, just looking at stuff, and they're counting it as tricks. Only got 3 seconds left. Both paws up on arm. That was the last one. Most tricks performed by a cat in 1 minute. 26 by Alexis and Annika Moritz from Austria. I am convinced, as someone who knows Hebrew, that the actual animal that deceived Eve in the garden was a cat. It's a mistranslation. Cats are the worst. And this video is conclusive proof, as if we needed any. Definitely, if you're on the audio only, would recommend tuning in at least for that part so you can see the riveting TV that is the most tricks performed by a cat in a minute. Second news story. So Biden built some cages. That's Biden is the Biden administration opened its first migrant facility for children, which are portable buildings with bars on the walls, on the windows, and so this is different from where I don't have a problem with the policy of separating children from the parents of illegal immigrants. I'm against most immigration laws. I actually favor open borders. The problem is the welfare state. This is where I part with most Republicans on the proper policy. I think there shouldn't be any borders because we should all be free, and the only reason to have borders is if you're protecting some sort of government handouts that shouldn't exist in the first place. So just because I don't agree with the government handouts doesn't mean I don't doesn't mean I'm going to change my other policy. But as far as how to go about having open borders, there would be a lot of changes that would need to happen fairly simultaneously. All that aside, I don't really have a huge problem with the policy. If we're going to have borders, we're going to need to enforce immigration laws, and the only practical way that you can do that when a family comes across the border, it would be more inhumane to force the children to stay in prison or to do something even worse, or as is often the case, you have people who aren't actually the parents of these children who are taking these children across the border in order to elicit emotional appeals that would allow them to stay illegally in the country. And so I'm fine with the policy. What is notable about this particular news story is the complete silence from the media and the doctoring of language to speak about it. All over the place, it was migrant facilities. For Trump, it was kids in cages. For Biden, from the Washington Post, the tweet was, "First migrant facility for children." To AUK's credit, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she saw this post by the Washington Post and said, "This is not okay, never has been okay, never will be okay, no matter the administration or party." Props to her for her consistency. Right? I disagree with her on the policy, but at least she's remaining consistent, which is more than you can say for most Democrats and the mainstream media. Deja vu, right? I just said the same thing twice. So that's the second news story. Your media is a bunch of Democrat hypocrites. Go figure. The last news story of the day is the one that we'll be talking about for a little bit. And it's kind of a couple of news stories rolled into one. President Macron of France had some... and this wasn't this week. I found an article written by Sky News that... or was it? It was MSN. I think this happened a couple of weeks ago. My dad actually brought it to my attention. Emmanuel Macron is standing up against American wokeism, which is a little bit scary on the face of it, right? When France is saying, "Guys, you got to cool it with these identity politics, with the extreme wokeism, it's not good. It's leading you down a bad path." That should set off some alarm bells for you. This is France we're talking about. France. Seriously, the home of ridiculous leftist liberalism and wokeism is saying we got to deal with this. So reading from MSN News, French President Emmanuel Macron has taken a stand against woke culture, labeling it as an American export and a cause of division and self-hatred, according to Sky News host James Morrow. Mr. Morrow said the latest move from the French Prime Minister was absolutely fascinating and suggested that there was a growing awareness about the dangers of wokeness. After a series of really vile terrorist attacks, this is quotations, after a series of really vile terrorist attacks, there's been a real wake-up on the fact that culture has consequences, and if you let these bad ideas of wokeness go too far, you end up with real tragedy on your hands. The Daily Citizen reporting on another speech given by Macron. The French politicians, intellectual elites, and journalists don't like American progressive ideas on race, gender, and post-colonialism. It should be a sign to Americans that wokeness is starting to go too far. Certain social science theories entirely imported from the U.S. with their problems, which I respect and which exist, but which are just added to ours. I say to myself that it is reasonable to make this choice, French President Emmanuel Macron said recently, and so we must very clearly reinvest on a massive scale in the field of social sciences, history, understanding of civilizations by creating posts, by stepping up dialogue, academic and scientific debate in order not to allow the knowledge and understanding of Islam as a religion, of the civilization it underpins, and its contribution to our country and our continent to become ideological and exclusively political debates. Macron's education minister has also stated there's a battle to wage against an intellectual matrix from American universities. Again, the fact that France is the one pointing this out, and to highlight the sort of thing that they're talking about, there was a news story this week. Sounds like one of my roommates is setting the house on fire, so I'll let him deal with it. To highlight this, Coca-Cola, you probably heard this, Coca-Cola held anti-racist training that over the course, somewhere in the course of it, instructed participants to, quote, be less white. Stop for just a real... So, be less white was the instruction. And let's just read some. So this is from Not the Bee. So it's a real news story, but it's covered in a very sarcastic way, which I appreciate. Coca-Cola has employees take training on how to, quote, be less white to combat racism. Coca-Cola is making employees go through racism training that teaches the company's workers how to, quote, be less white. Coca-Cola, being an equitable company that cares about not offending woke folk, recently required its employees to take an anti-racist training. In other words, Coca-Cola taught its employees how to be modern racists. Amen. Exactly correct. Here's the original tweet with the images from the training. Breaking: Coca-Cola is forcing employees to complete online training, telling them to try to be less white. And these are some of the images. Let me see if I can load some of these quickly. Reading the slides that are on the page, right, which this person took from the training itself. Confronting racism, understanding what it means to be white, challenging what it means to be racist. To be less white is to, and here's a list, be less oppressive, be less arrogant, be less certain, be less defensive, be less ignorant, be more humble, listen, believe, break with apathy, break with white solidarity. In the U.S. and other Western nations, white people are socialized to feel that they are inherently superior because they are white. Research shows that by age 3 to 4, children understand that it is better to be white. And then another slide that just says, try to be less white. Surprise, surprise, guess who was conducting and organizing this? Our old friend Robin DiAngelo. Yeah, this is all just racist garbage. Go figure. Now, Coca-Cola did announce that they realized after the fact that there may have been some problems with this training, so they're trying to backpedal. The curriculum will be refined, they said. Not eliminated, just refined. This is something that I haven't talked too much about on the show. I have an episode on the subject of race and racism. Racism is judging someone differently based solely on the color of their skin than you otherwise would. And the modern idea, the modern redefinition of this term that includes prejudice through the exercise of power and oppression is hot garbage. It does not negate the actual legitimate racist history of this country. There was legitimate, legal, horrific racism in the founding of this country, systemic in large portions of this country's history. All of the legal racism has been done away with, legally speaking. You cannot find a law in the books that specifically allows, promotes, makes it okay to be racist, to judge someone differently based on the color of their skin, other than the major institution that is legalized racism, which is affirmative action. Man, blanking on the terms now. That's pretty much the only legal racism that still exists on a systemic level. There are still racists in the world, for sure. Many of them are the woke left. There was a video that went viral a while ago that was a comedian. It was just two guys, one of them wearing a t-shirt that said woke, one that said racist, and it was showing how all of the language is exactly the same, because wokeism is racist. Wokeism is racism, just applied in a new way. All of these descriptions of being white, oppressive, arrogant, certain, defensive, ignorant, humble, listen, believe, apathy, break with apathy, break with white solidarity. All of these are descriptions of human beings. Some of them good descriptions, some of them bad. Ones that are good. Certain, I actually think. Being certain of yourself, confidence is a good thing. Humility is also a good thing. So being humble. Listening to others. Yeah, absolutely. Just the note, believe. Believe what? Believe this racist garbage that we're telling you. That's not the best. Break with apathy. Break with white solidarity. Flip these around. The simple test to see if something is racist that you might not notice is racist is to just import a different race into the equation and see if it's offensive to you when it previously wasn't, or if it suddenly is not offensive to you when it previously was. There's a good chance that it might be racist. So if the instruction was be less Asian, be less black, there would be problems here. I'm thinking it's about time to do another full episode on race and racism. So I'm going to leave that there for y'all to mull over, and maybe I'll collect my thoughts and think of a way to say them more eloquently and more specifically, clearly, because I hate talking about topics where the language is completely... This is most of what I talked about last time on the shows. The language itself has been so adulterated that you can't even talk about the subject without offending large swaths of people and being misunderstood. And so I on that topic, I prefer to think of the clearest way to say something before turning on the mic, not just running my mouth. So I will leave it there. We are going to go ahead and move on to the COVID Minute.
In a COVID minute, everything can change. In a COVID minute, and things can get a little strange. In a COVID minute.
one particular story for the COVID Minute today, and one that you might be surprised by. North Dakota, the legislature of North Dakota wrote a bill, and the House passed the bill. So there's still a few more stages for this bill to go through before it becomes law in North Dakota. But the bill was a strike back at some of the ridiculous policies and overreaches that have happened as a result of COVID. And here's the problem. This bill specifically, let me summarize the bill. So reading from the Daily Wire, the North Dakota House of Representatives passed a bill Monday that would prohibit state and local officials, schools, and businesses from mandating face masks. That's a quote. The bill passed by a narrow margin of 50 to 44, and will now go on to the state Senate. It's put forward by a couple of Republican senators. Okay, this bill would make it illegal for businesses to enforce mask mandates on their customers. It would also make it illegal for government entities to enforce mask mandates on their citizens. So schools, government buildings, and private businesses would not be allowed to require masks as a rule. And I think that, so I have a couple things to say on this, but I am against this law. I'm against this bill. And you might be saying, wait a second, Stephen, you hate masks. You think all the government overreach of mask mandates is the worst. Why would you be against a bill that outlaws mask mandates? It sounds like that's something you'd be all for. I am against this bill because of the inclusion of private businesses in them not being allowed to have mask mandates on their customers. I've said from the beginning, if a business business owner looks at the science, looks at the possible options available to him and says, I want to require my customers to wear a mask when they come into my store, I am all for that business owner doing that. I probably won't be shopping there, but he should be allowed to do what he wants with his business, or her. Now, I'm just thinking of James A. Caster. He or she, it's only ever said by a man who fully intended on just saying he, but then remembered that she exists. I actually just use he because that's the proper grammatical way to phrase something when you are talking about a hypothetical individual human being. You put it into the masculine. That's how English works. That aside, a business owner wants to have a mask mandate in his business. Totally in favor of that business owner freely deciding to have a mask mandate. My problem was when the government said, hey, business owner, you have to have a mask mandate in your business. If you don't, follow all these structures and put up signs and force your customers to wear them, we're going to fine you. That was my problem. It was government forcing its citizens to comply with mask mandates. That's the issue. I, as a citizen of this nation, don't have the option to not be a citizen aside from leaving. And so if we're going to be a country that claims to promote freedom, then I want it to actually promote freedom. I think that's a fundamental human right. I don't know if I would say fundamental human right. Fundamental right of our republic. So the same applies to the business owner. The business owner has the freedom to do with his business what he wants. This kind of dovetails with the whole race thing, where a lot of people say, yeah, but outlawing of racism and eliminating Jim Crow by force by the government, that was a good thing. You can't have discrimination. Really hot take, and one that requires further explanation, even more deep explanation later, but I wasn't in favor of that. If you actually look at the social sciences and the data available from that historical period, the general opinion was moving in the direction of racism is wrong, which it absolutely is, and so businesses should not be racist in their practices, should not keep black people out because of the color of their skin. And that was where the culture was headed, against Jim Crow. Jim Crow laws were evil. They should have been outlawed. The idea of creating protected classes with Title IX and saying that businesses were not allowed to discriminate, were not allowed to tell customers that they didn't want their business for whatever reason they wanted, that was where the problem was. Me not being able to have access to a service that you provide is not a violation of my rights or my freedom. The government forcing me to provide a service to someone I don't want to provide it to is a violation of my rights and my freedom. There's more to say there, obviously, but we'll leave that little thing for now. The problem here is we're overcorrecting, swinging in the opposite direction. The answer is always authoritarianism for these people. It is always, well, we'll just make a law that forces people to do this. And this dovetails with what we're going to talk about in the meat segment, which is the question of the legislation of morality. But my response to this was just, why can't any level of government, federal, state, or local, just try freedom? Freedom of association. Why, instead of... I'm in favor of the government side of this. This law that said government entities can't pass mask mandates, can't force citizens to wear a mask in government buildings. I'm totally on board with that. Governments should be able to request it, but they should not be able to discriminate because governments are different from private individuals and private businesses. Freedom, guys, freedom. I think it would be the wrong move from a business standpoint to have a mask mandate, but I'm totally in favor of you business owners having them and enforcing them to the degree that you wish. This is a good example at my work. There's technically mask mandates at my work. I've gone to my boss and had conversations with him and explained my moral issues with them and my medical limitations, and we worked out an agreement, and we're cool now, basically. But totally on board with DTS. If they want to have a mask mandate at DTS, they can. I think it's dumb. I don't think they should. I disagree with their decision to have that mask mandate, but I'm totally on board with their decision to do it. It's the force by government. Government is just a gun. Government points itself at people whenever it has any sort of a law or a mandate. The way that you enforce anything ultimately is at gunpoint. And so I want that gun to be in the hand of private citizens as much as possible. The other problem with this particular article was more of just an indictment on the media. I looked at 13. I counted 13 different articles reporting on this news story about North Dakota's new bill. None of them, including the Daily Wire, which I'm a big fan of, none of them included a link to the bill. These people call themselves journalists. It was not a particularly difficult bill to find. I had to go to the original source that everybody else was quoting, the news source that everybody else was quoting, to find the number of the bill, and you had to actually have a login to get it. So I spent 20 minutes searching the NorthDakota.gov site to try and find this particular bill. Eventually, I found it by, you know how when you visit a site that requires a login, but it's just like a pop-up overlay, and you can still kind of read a little bit of the article underneath. Luckily, the number of the bill was in that little grayed out section, so I was able to find the particular bill that was referenced in the original news article. But goodness, journalists, like try a little bit of journalism, like not a lot. Just check maybe the original source once. Maybe, definitely link the original source in your article before you spread it like wildfire. So I'm going to read, it's a 1-page bill. I'm going to read you the whole bill, and then I'm going to show you the parts that are wrong. So, 21.0189.02000. House Bill number 1323, the 67th Legislative Assembly of North Dakota, introduced by Representatives Hoverson, Magrum, Senator O'Larson. A bill for an act to create and enact a new section to Chapter 23-07 of the North Dakota Century Code relating to limitations on mask-wearing requirements, be it enacted by the Legislative Assembly of North Dakota, Section 1. A new section to Chapter 23-07 of the North Dakota Century Code is created and enacted as follows. Limitations on requirements to wear a mask. 1. A state or local elected official, the state, or a political subdivision of the state may not mandate an individual in this state use a face mask, face shield, or other face covering. 2. Subsection 1 prohibits making use of a face mask, shield, or covering a condition for entry, education, employment, or services. 3. Subsection 1 applies notwithstanding authority granted under other provisions of law, including Section 230105, Section 230706, and Chapter 3717.1. 4. If a state or local elected official, the state, or a political subdivision of the state recommends an individual in this state use a face mask, shield, or covering, the official or entity shall provide notice the recommendation is not mandatory. You read that bill and you go, wait a second, there wasn't anything about businesses in there. Correct. Correct. If you go hunt down these other sections of the code, you can maybe reinterpret this to also apply to businesses. So the way that this was reported by 13 different articles was incorrect. It was wrong. They did not have the correct information that they were reporting because they didn't read the bill. I don't get why this is so difficult. I have never taken a journalism class in my life. I just know how to read, and I know how to think. It's really not that hard, and it's just like, yeah, okay, I'm just gonna get frustrated and start making really, really brash statements that I don't really need to be making. So that's COVID Minute. Let's just move on from that and get over into the meat segment. Oh yeah, my audio is messed up because I connected to my AirPlay. 1 second. The joys of trying to do video. Let's go again.
The meat segment.
Yes, we eat something's flesh. I want meat.
Much better. If you're watching the video, just to explain what was going on here, that was my screensaver, but then my Apple TV went to sleep, and so I woke it up and then connected my laptop. So this is my secondary desktop screen with my Reason to Refrain background, and then when I connected to my AirPlay, the audio went through the TV instead of through the mixer. So, learning curve. If you're listening, not much of that probably made sense. That's okay. Meat segment today. I want to talk about the 3 basic axioms that form my political philosophy. And then hopefully, if there's time, we'll talk a little bit about the question of legislating morality. And I think I'll be able to fit this in part of in explaining my political philosophy. So there are 3 basic axioms that I follow in trying to think. Like I've said on the show before, like and subscribe. Please go to Facebook, YouTube, like, subscribe. Request topics for the meat segment on this show. You like how I slipped that in, right? Please, it would really help me if you go tell your friends about the show. Tell them they can watch now. Like I've said on the show before, you should like and subscribe. Also, like I've said before on the show, I'm not a particularly smart guy. I know how to think, though. I know the basics of thought. I know the 3 fundamental rules of logic, and I apply them. And I learned how to think from a young age, and it served me well. And so these 3 basic truths are priorities, preferences that I have concerning government that I think align with the biblical mandates concerning civil authorities and what our priorities as citizens of this world awaiting resurrection should be. I think that basically every single news story that I encounter, every single question that I encounter on a political level, one of these three basic axioms factors in and determines my stance on the subject. And I just work the system. I know these three truths that I'm committed to, and the logic follows and ultimately produces opinion that then I spout off about into a microphone. And then I pray to the Lord that He has been guiding me appropriately, or that His will be done more accurately. And I try to remain open to the possibility that I'm not applying the logic correctly, that I am going against one of my axioms or something like that, and that when I'm shown to be wrong, then I hope that I would change my opinion. It has happened on occasion. Often my pride gets in the way, and it takes a little while for it to kick in, but eventually I change my opinion, and I want to be right in the best way possible. So I'm going to go through these three basic axioms. The first one is smaller, merely human government is always better than bigger, merely human government. What do I mean by this? It's small government conservatism would be another way to put it. It's I want this government gun to have smaller rounds, fewer bullets, be pointed at fewer people. The Bible describes the government as a sword repeatedly. That's why the government's just a gun. The gun is the modern equivalent of the biblical sword. Merely human government should be smaller, less oppressive, have less power in basically every arena. Now, God's government, the one that is coming at the resurrection when Christ reigns on the throne, it's going to be as big as He wants it. I think it will be, again, largely based on freedom when you have redeemed, resurrected creatures living on a new earth with no longer having sinful flesh to tempt them towards evil. Freedom is kind of expected at that point. Freedom is it's no longer a possibility for evil, so that's what we'll get. But until then, what we're left with is human government, civil authorities, so to speak. And as long as humans are operating that authority, there's going to be the chances for abuses of that authority. There's going to be the opportunities to use power inappropriately to harm others. There's always going to be the chance that humans make mistakes. Humans do evil. And so those evil humans that are in government, whether they're trying to be evil or trying not to be, they're going to be doing these things. They're going to be having this gun to wield. And so the errors that they make, I would like them to be as small as possible. Since they're necessarily going to make mistakes and going to make errors, the smaller scope that they have, the fewer errors, the smaller error they could make. That's why I want smaller human government. And this is premised on a Christian worldview, because the Christian says any injustice that is left unrighted by human government, and let's be honest, no injustice can really be righted by human government. It can only be righted by divine government. All of the wrongs that have been enacted on this earth will be dealt with in the resurrection, at the great white throne judgment, if nowhere else. Everyone will be judged according to their deeds, or according to whether or not their name is written in the book of life. This is all Revelation chapter 20, if you're interested. That's where all of the things that have happened that are wrong will be set to right. The people will get their just deserts. It's the Christian worldview that believes in this ultimate righting of wrongs, ultimate what's the word I'm trying to think of? Dispensing of justice that happens to everyone universally. That's what allows the Christian to have hope that, or that's what allows the Christian to affirm the idea of innocent until proven guilty. It's what allows the Christian to to have any kind of an optimistic view of the world when such evil things people have gotten away with it. That to commit Godwin's, to break Godwin's law, to commit the Godwin's fallacy, Hitler kind of got away with the Holocaust, right? He killed millions and never faced punishment from civil authorities for that because he killed himself before such punishment could be administered. The Christian believes that if Hitler was not repentant and shown the mercy of God before he died, he will be punished for those deeds eternally in hell. His evilness will be appropriately dealt with, so to speak. Every time a murderer gets off, a rapist walks free, every time an injustice seems to have occurred, the Christian rests assured that that injustice will be set right at the Great White Throne. And that conviction allows the Christian to advocate for a smaller government. If you don't have that, if you don't have the Great White Throne judgment, which is going to set to right all injustices, you are stuck with bigger and bigger government that has more and more power to try and set to right every injustice. And thus, a bigger government that can then make more mistakes and create bigger and more offensive injustices. It's unfortunately a self-fulfilling detrimental prophecy. That's why I favor smaller human government, because resurrection's coming. And that's going to fix all of the problems created by not having a strong enough authoritarian force. That's the case. Second axiom that guides my political philosophy: freedom is always better than safety. I get this from a couple places in the Bible. We've talked about it before on the show. 2 Peter is the clearest one, where it says, "Act as free men," in the midst of explaining what the point of government is, which is to punish evildoers and praise the good. This is what Peter says, I think word for word. I'm quoting, obviously in English. Freedom is always better than safety. That's always what I'm going to pick. If I have to choose between the two, freedom. I would rather have risky freedom than safety. And you should too. Everybody prefers freedom over safety until their freedom is taken away, and then they have neither freedom nor safety. And this is where that I guess I can slip in the legislation of morality. There's no phrase. I first heard it from my AP World History or U.S. History teacher in Singapore, sophomore year of high school. He was I'm not sure if he was a libertarian, a classical liberal, or a progressive leftist. I would guess a progressive leftist, but I don't remember much about him, honestly. I remember hating that class just because I was in it with my sister, who was better at school than me, and 2 years older. And it was my first AP class. I didn't really understand how college level thought worked. But anyway, one of the things that I do remember about that class is he would constantly repeat, "You can't legislate morality." And he was very anti-Christian. That was also another reason I didn't particularly enjoy the class. You can't legislate morality, and you'll hear this mantra quite often from various sides of the political aisle. And it's half right and it's half wrong. There are two different senses in which you can take this phrase, "you can't legislate morality." It's often used to say, oh, well, we don't want to pass that law because that law just upholds some Christian view of the world that says XYZ thing that is wrong. Abortion laws, homosexuality, transgenderism, all pick your thing that Christians say shouldn't be done and want to, broadly speaking, make it a law, and you can't legislate morality is thrown around. Now, the sense in which this is right is that you can't force people by the laws you make into behaving rightly. Right? Just because you make a law that appropriately punishes evil behavior does not mean that people are going to follow it. Doesn't mean that people are going to act according to that moral law. They might just break that law. You can't legislate people into morally correct action. Moral action comes from the heart of man, and the heart of man is desperately wicked. Who can understand it? So in that sense, I agree. You can't legislate morality. You can't force people into acting good just because of the laws you make, which is why largely I'm against laws that legislate personal morality. We'll get into that in a second. The sense in which it's wrong is the sense it's usually used in. It's wrong in the sense that all of your civil laws communicate a moral code. You can't legislate morality if what you're saying is your laws shouldn't communicate a moral code, should not uphold a moral law. Then there's no such thing as laws, because laws are just trying to ascertain what is right and what is wrong. Laws are just saying this is wrong and we're going to punish you if you don't do it, or if you do it. Excuse me. The idea that you can't legislate morality means your laws can't have a moral quality to them is actually inherently ridiculous. All laws are moral. All of your civil laws reflect a moral law. It's just a question of what morality are they going to reflect. What realm of authority does the civil authority possess? And I think it's interpersonal morality. I think that true interpersonal morality, as in moral laws that involve more than one person, should be assessed and should fall under the realm of government enforcement. It's just another way, basically, of saying people should be free until they hurt somebody else. But to put it more explicitly, more appropriately, the role of the government is to assess and execute punitive damages for the violation of interpersonal morality. You've heard me say this on the program many a time. What do I mean by that? The role of government is to assess and execute punitive damages. So government is supposed to look at a situation and say, here is the punishment for this action. Assess and execute punitive damages. That's the punitive part. Punishments only, not preventative. And this is, again, another way that I depart with lots of Republicans and other people on the right. I agree with their basic moral code, but what they want to do is they want to try and legislate morality in the sense of saying, well, we'll make laws and it'll make people do the right thing. No, that's not going to work. Preventative damages are silly. The role of government is not to prevent people from violating the moral law. The role of government is to punish evildoers. This is 1 Peter 2. Assess and execute punitive damages for the violation of interpersonal morality. Why not just morality? Why specifically interpersonal morality? The reason is because humans can't judge the heart of another human. For governments to assess and execute punitive damages for the violation of personal morality or intrapersonal morality, something where if the government was going to try and make lust a crime, or gluttony a crime, or wearing a seatbelt or not wearing a seatbelt a crime, these are all sins against the self, and the motivation for that thing comes from within. And while I would agree that those things are wrong, I think that often the degree of wrongness, how wrong it is, depends on the heart of the man in question, what the person intended. It's simply just not government's place to judge that morality or to punish that immorality. It's the place of the church and ultimately God. The assessing and executing of punitive damages for the violation of intrapersonal morality is the role of the church. The church elders are supposed to exercise church discipline when a member sins, either against himself or against God. Obviously, he always sins against God, or against his fellow man in the church. that's the realm of authority over that particular kind of morality. Government's role is, you hurt that guy, I'm going to make you pay for that guy. You can see this reflected in Israel's laws. You can see this reflected in the seed form of human government when it's given to man, coming off of the ark. When man sheds man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed. I give to man the sword to wield. This is all Genesis 9, the Noahic covenant. Excuse me. The role of government, then, all of this I pull together and I say, okay, government's job is to punish that guy for what he did to that guy. Government's job is, if you lied, if you cheated, if you stole, if you harmed another, you should be punished for that. If you did something to yourself, the church should punish you for that. And if you get away with it, God will ultimately punish you for that. Unless he sees fit to, by his grace, forgive you of those sins along with all of the others. All of this requires freedom. All of this is premised on the idea that freedom is better than safety. All of this is premised on the idea that safety is basically just slavery. Slaves are pretty safe because if someone owns you, they have a vested interest in your survival and well-being, so to speak, because they view you as property and they view you as something that could harm them. I don't want safety. I don't want slavery. I want freedom. I quite often I see these things as diametrically opposed. We are not guaranteed safety in this life. Every measure of safety that you have is sheer grace from God. Every single bit of it. The reason that you take another breath is grace from God. How dare I steal his air? The last breath I took, I borrowed it from him. And I'm never going to give it back. And when you borrow something without giving it back, you're stealing. Pray for Vodi Bakum. Comes from the 5 best minutes of preaching I've ever heard in my life. Yeah, freedom. That's the answer. That's going to be what ultimately allows the gospel to work. That's going to be what ultimately allows human charity to function. That's ultimately going to be what allows and maximizes the good for human beings. This is the basic concept of capitalism, is that individuals are free to compete. And competition isn't particularly safe. So I'll move on since I'm starting to run out of time. So first axiom, first basic point of my political philosophy: smaller, merely human government is always better than bigger, merely human government. Second axiom: freedom is always better than safety. Last one: unpalatable truth is always better than comfortable lies. I could just as easily say truth is always better than lies. It means just about the same thing, but why do I include these two adjectives? To make it more interesting. To remind us that sometimes we don't like truth. Unpalatable truth is better than comfortable lies. This is true in evangelism, this is true in medicine, this is true in marriage, and it's also true in politics. The basic message or point of evangelism is to spread the good news, the very palatable truth, but the unpalatable truth that must be understood in order for the goodness of that news to be understood also often needs to be communicated. The sinfulness of man, total depravity, often has to be communicated, particularly in our culture, which is just constantly rife with the enemy's mantra of "you're good just the way you are." Accept yourself just the way you are. Unpalatable truth is part of evangelism. Unpalatable truth is part of medicine. I would much rather a doctor who comes in and tells me, yeah, you've got cancer and you're going to die a lot sooner than you expected, and here are some treatments, rather than, oh, everything's fine. Obviously, we want unpalatable truth when it comes to medicine. In marriage, marriages don't work if they're built on lies. Anyone who has a successful or healthy marriage knows that the unpalatable truth is quite often necessary and good. It is the right course of action. And in politics, it's the same. From my politicians, I would much rather hear the ugly truth, the unpalatable truth, than the comfortable lie. Ugly truths like this country is massively in debt and it will collapse financially and you are in for some hard times. Unpalatable truths like the government can't save you and it shouldn't save you. But broader ones than that also. The unpalatable truth that life's not fair and it never will be. Not even in the resurrection. Not even in the resurrection will life be fair. Life will always be unfair because in the resurrection, people will be there by sheer grace, not by their works. There will be some of the worst murderers that we've ever known who make it to the resurrection because they repented and trusted in Christ's righteousness, not their own. And to our fallen understanding of morality that says karma is a thing and that says I can assess what is right and wrong, that I can be like God knowing good and evil, I can eat of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, I can be wise. You can be wise in your own eyes only. We look at that and say that's not fair, that's not right, that's not just. And yet, the author of fairness, rightness, and justice has made it so. So maybe we're the ones who are wrong. Life's not fair, and it never will be, at least not by what we call fair. You can't fix the past. It's another unpalatable truth that is better than comfortable lies. You cannot fix the past. Even government's role is not to fix the violation of interpersonal morality. It says to assess and execute punitive damages for the violation of interpersonal morality. You can't go back in time and unmurder someone. You can't go back in time and unmaim or unsteal. You might be able to give back what was stolen, but there's still a section of time where you violated that person's right to dominion, to property, by stealing their property from them. And that section of time where their property was no longer their own cannot be returned. Time marches on. Can't fix it, can't change it. The past is set in stone. You can only move forward and resolve not to err in the same way. Err in the same way. You can try not to make the same mistake again. But you can't fix the past. Again, it's an unpalatable truth. It is true, though. The comforting lie is the idea that you can make it right. That on this earth, prior to the resurrection, I can fix the wrong that was done. And you can't. Never going to happen. Coming up on my time limit. Final kind of thoughts to wrap up this thing. First of all, I'm really glad that we're back on video. I'm excited to see where this goes. Hopefully we'll be able to get a few guests on the show soon. I've been talking to a couple friends who, one in particular, friend from work, and we talk about politics all the time. He's on the left, but he's a Democrat. He's not really on the left. He's not a leftist. And so we have a lot of fun disagreeing well. So hopefully I'll be able to have him on the show sometime. Got some other friends who are experts in a few areas, and some friends who have some interesting things to say, interesting thoughts to contribute to the conversation, so to speak. This episode, I'm hoping, will refer back to a lot when we're trying to assess a particular news item or a particular truth, or truth claim, I should say, and say three axioms that guide political philosophy. Smaller government is better than big government. Freedom is better than slavery. Unpalatable truth is better than comfortable lies. I think these are eminently biblical. I think they're eminently reasonable. They're not very likable. And yet, no question, the philosophy that I hold makes many people not like me. I'm okay with that. I'm in favor of the truth, and most people, everyone really, even myself, are not in favor of the truth. How can I both be in favor of the truth and not in favor of the truth at the same time? Well, my sinful flesh desires lies, comfortable lies, but my redeemed spirit in Christ seeks the truth, the way, the truth, and the life. He is the answer to all of these questions, and guess what? He's coming back. Can't wait to have him on the show sometime. Might have crossed over a little bit into blasphemy there, so I better wrap it up. Send your questions, send your ideas, thoughts. I love getting your messages. Send them in. Particularly ideas for the meat segment. I love if there's something you would like me to cover. I particularly enjoy expositing biblical passages, and I haven't done a lot of that just because I'm not really sure whether or not people like it. But if you do enjoy hearing some deeper exposition of the Bible, I'd be happy to do some more of that. Let me know. Send your messages to Stephen@reasonedrefrain.com. That's Stephen, Stephen, the correct spelling, at reasonedrefrain, ReasonedRefrain.com. Colossians 3:16, let the word of Christ dwell in you richly, teaching and admonishing one another in all wisdom, singing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs with thankfulness in your hearts to God. You'll hear me next time unless Jesus comes back before then. Reasoned Refrain is written and produced by Stephen Curto. The views and opinions expressed in this episode are my own and should not be taken as reflective of any institution with which I am associated. Theme song written and performed by J.J. Anderson and Stephen Curto, mastered by J.J. Anderson. Reasoned Refrain is the property of Stephen Curto, all rights reserved.